Good afternoon. Actually, good morning. The first item of business this morning is general questions, and at question number 1, I call Fergus Ewing.
Presiding Officer, to ask the Scottish Government, in light of reports that gulls can cause serious human injury, whether it will direct Nature Scot to issue licences to control the birds and help prevent such injuries.
Minister Jim Fairley.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I absolutely recognise the significant impact that urban gull populations are being felt in some of our towns and cities. Now, I met with Nature Scot yesterday on the back of my meeting with Mr Ewing and Mr Ross last week, and they have agreed that they will consider an area-wide gull licences to deal with the immediate concerns of the upcoming nesting season for potential health and safety reasons, but it is mindful of our conservation obligations. There is a vital role for local authorities to play in this, dealing with local communities, working with building owners and businesses to reduce the appeal of urban areas as nest sites or for feeding zones. Because I'm quite sure we've all seen plenty of people standing at the side of a pier throwing chips out, which only encourages more gulls to come in. As a result of that, I will therefore chair a summit later this year that brings together the key partners to put measures in place to prevent measures in place now to prevent these issues from arising again next year.
Ewing.
Well, Nature Scot have been considering it forever, Presiding Officer, and all too often in Scotland, where there is a serious injury or death, which could and should have been avoided, we have a public inquiry, often costing millions of pounds, followed by a report to ministers who will say, we must learn lessons from this. Well, Presiding Officer, would it not be better to have taken the necessary action to prevent the injury or death ever occurring where that risk is clear, direct and foreseeable, as in this case? And given the risk of injury, of serious injury and death, will the Minister now take the necessary action with the Section 11 order under the Natural Heritage Scotland Act 1991 before it is too late?
Minister.
Thank you again, Presiding Officer. I very much recognise the points that Mr Ewing has made, but as I set out a moment ago, to reduce the risk of health and safety concerns of gulls, Nature Scot will be considering an area-wide gull licence to deal with the immediate concerns of the upcoming nesting season for the potential health and safety reasons. And I understand that there is an issue around what the potential issues are that Mr Ewing has highlighted, and I have made that very clear to Nature Scot. But gull numbers are in decline, and the longer-term solution cannot be further population reductions where mitigation action can be taken. And that requires collective action. So we will work together through a summit that I will hold later this year with key partners, including local authorities, to ensure that appropriate measures are in place ahead of next year's breeding season.
Douglas Ross.
Presiding Officer, I agree with everything Fergus Ewing has said and the issues around people being injured, because it is happening on a daily or weekly basis. Yet just this morning I received a Freedom of Information response from Nature Scot when I had asked how many injuries they had recorded by gull attacks in each of the last 5 years, and they have said in their response that they do not hold that information. So how can they be taking decisions on these licences when they don't know the impact? And I've also put this to the Minister before. They are refusing licences at the moment for reasons such as businesses could give customers umbrellas to protect themselves by walking in and out, and they won't be attacked by gulls if they've got umbrellas. Does he agree that that is utter madness and Nature Scot have to treat this as a serious issue?
Minister.
As I said, I spoke to Mr Ross and Mr Ewing last week. I have raised these points with Nature Scot. We have come to the conclusion that there will be actions taken this year in order to make sure that we deal with the immediate problem of this year, but there will be a summit that will allow us to make sure we take the appropriate action to preserve the status of the gulls, but at the same time make sure we can live beside them.
Question number 2, Stuart McMillan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what dialogue it has had with NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde regarding shared care agreements for adults with private ADHD and autism diagnosis.
Cabinet Secretary Neil Gray.
Thank you, President Officer. My officials were in communication with NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde regarding shared care agreements for adults with private ADHD and autism diagnoses in November. Colleagues in NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde provided their policy and their approach to private diagnosis. Additionally, the Director of Mental Health wrote to the Chief Executives of all health boards in March with a baseline survey of neurodevelopmental assessment and support for adults available locally. This included a question on protocol when approached by an adult with a private diagnosis that wishes for this to be ratified by the NHS.
Stuart McMillan.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that reply, and it has been repeatedly raised with my office and myself that adults in my constituency feel like they have no other option than to pursue a private ADHD or autism diagnosis in instances where they are given a diagnosis and are prescribed medication. Trying to get an NHS shared care agreement in place is the next challenge, and for many this can result in huge financial bills which they risk not being able to afford if the NHS doesn't take on their treatment. So can the Cabinet Secretary therefore advise what additional work is to take place to ensure that the criteria for NHS shared care agreements is made clear to patients, and that the process for assessing whether a private diagnosis meets NHS standards is carried out at pace?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, President Officer. I thank Stuart McMillan for raising this on behalf of his constituents, who I absolutely sympathise and empathise with. There has been an increased awareness of neurodevelopmental and divergent issues for adults, which has seen a growing demand upon services, and that poses challenges that we're seeking to respond to. Some NHS boards may have shared care policies, but it remains at the clinical discretion of each individual GP to decide the best course of action for their patients. A recommendation from a private specialist for a particular medicine does not entitle the patient to NHS prescriptions for that medicine. However, the National Autism Implementation Team published guidance on prescribing ADHD medication to adults following a private sector diagnosis in Scotland in April 2022. This guidance is available to practitioners and to patients, and officials are engaging with the Royal College of GPs here in Scotland to understand more about what could be done to ameliorate the situation of private diagnosis of ADHD and voluntary agreements.
Brief supplementary, Willie Rennie.
The system is wholly inadequate, and it's very short-sighted because the demand is huge now for private diagnosis because the NHS system is inadequate. This will just put further pressure on the NHS if they have to go back to the start of the system again. So either we improve ADHD services or we allow shared care arrangements. We cannot cut it off in the way that's been done so far because many, many patients are losing out as a result.
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank Willie Rennie for that question, and I think, like him, I recognise, as I did in answer to Stuart McMillan, with increased awareness has come a massively increased demand upon services, and I obviously want the NHS to be able to respond to that, which is why we are working with the likes of the Royal College of GPs, as I set out to Stuart McMillan, but also the publication of the guidance from the National Autism Implementation Team to make sure that we're doing exactly as Willie Rennie asks of us.
Thank you. Question number 3, Rhoda Grant.
To ask the Scottish Government what assessment has been done of any impact on CAMHS waiting time targets in light of reports of autism assessment services being cancelled, leaving more children in distress and unable to access support that requires a diagnosis.
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, President Officer. CAMHS waiting times statistics capture children who meet the CAMHS criteria. Children who require autism or other neurodevelopmental support are not reported in these statistics unless they have a comorbid mental health condition. Our focus should be on improving support regardless of a formal diagnosis, and the neurodevelopmental specification places an expectation on the NHS and local authority children's services to work together to provide support to meet a child's needs when they need it, and this should not be dependent on a formal diagnosis.
Rhoda Grant.
There are 1,537 children in NHS Highland area waiting for a neurodevelopmental assessment, with more unable to get onto the waiting list at all. What is the Scottish Government doing to ensure that young people receive the assessment in a timely fashion? How are they dealing with the knock-on impact of child and adolescent mental health services? And what assistance are they putting in place in school for these children that are stuck on assessment waiting lists, given the reduction in additional support needs staff?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you. As I said, there are different elements at play here. One is those children that will meet CAMS criteria. That may include children with neurodevelopmental conditions and the direct intervention that's required around supporting children with neurodevelopmental conditions. As I said in my initial answer, should not be dependent upon a diagnosis in order for that support to be in place, regardless of the setting that we're talking about, whether it's education or other elements. However, we are supporting and directly allocating £123.5 million to NHS boards and IGBs for a new enhanced mental health outcomes framework. The framework provides a single, flexible funding stream to support continued improvements and better outcomes across a range of mental health and psychological services, including neurodevelopmental services. We've also granted £250,000 to fund a range of individual projects to improve neurodevelopmental support for children and young people, including the use of digital tools for assessment. And we've provided councils with £65 million since 2020 to develop and further deliver community-based mental health support for children and young people.
Emma Harper.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I welcome the figures that last month showed that the national standard and waiting times for children and young people accessing mental health services has been met. And the Cabinet Secretary has just given a comprehensive answer about the work going on. So I'm interested to hear from the Cabinet Secretary, how will the Government continue to ensure progress continues for children and young people across Scotland, including in Dumfries and Galloway?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, President Officer. I thank Emma Harper for recognising what is a significant milestone, that 90.6% of children and young people started treatment in CAMS within 18 weeks of referral. I'm incredibly grateful to the dedicated CAMS staff who play a critical role in achieving this. We've allocated £123.5 million to NHS boards and IJBs in 24-25 to support the improvements and better outcomes across mental health services, including CAMS and neurodevelopmental services, and we will continue to work closely with boards to ensure that this progress continues so that we can sustain that significant milestone having been reached and ensure all children and young people can access the support that they need.
Question number 4, Claire Hawley.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And I remind Chamber I hold an NHS contract with Greater Glasgow and Clyde to ask the Scottish Government how it is supporting the uptake of childhood immunisations in NHS Lanarkshire.
Minister Jenny Minto.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Childhood immunisation rates across NHS Lanarkshire continue to be amongst the highest in Scotland, reflecting the hard work and commitment of our colleagues in the NHS. Vaccination remains one of the most important public health interventions, but we have seen decreases in uptake compared with previous years in Scotland as well as globally. We are working with Public Health Scotland and health boards to improve uptake, address health inequalities and support those eligible for vaccinations. I urge parents and carers of young children to bring them for vaccination when invited to give them the best protection against serious disease.
Claire Hawley.
I thank the Minister for that answer, and it's reassuring that childhood vaccination rates remain high in Scotland, particularly as we know that perceived minor illness that these vaccinations protect against can cause disabilities or even fatalities. However, misinformation and conspiracy theories have become all too commonplace in relation to vaccinations, often fuelled by social media. Can the Minister advise what the Scottish Government is doing to tackle this issue and ensure parents and carers have the correct and factual information that they require to protect their children's health?
Minister.
I thank Ms Hawkey for her supplementary question, and she does raise a very important issue. The Scottish Government is aware of this serious problem and is currently seeking to understand the nature of how false and misleading information affects the health outcomes of Scotland's people, leaning heavily on international best practice and the latest academic research. NHS Inform and supporting immunisation materials are frequently reviewed and updated for accuracy, ensuring that the public can access the latest available information on vaccinations.
Carol Mockin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Recent Public Health Scotland figures found that just 2 in 5 high-risk infants were vaccinated against flu in the past winter. This means that more than 1,000 were left unprotected. We also know that the decline in childhood immunisation levels continued in 2024, with uptake lowest in the most deprived and rural areas. Can I ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to investigate why this is and what it is doing to address the causes of low uptake in particular?
Minister.
I thank Carol Mochan for her question and agree that work needs to be done with regard to ensuring that vaccination are available across all areas, which they are, but ensure that that uptake is high as well. So as a result, we are currently working with digital colleagues who have developed a system which will provide greater granularity of data so we can understand where the areas of real need are, and working then with health boards to ensure that these areas are targeted.
Thank you. Question number 5 has been withdrawn. Question number 6, Faisal Chowdhury.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how it is encouraging the growth of community energy projects.
Cabinet Secretary Gillian Martin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. At the end of December 2024, there was an estimated 1,109 megawatts of community and locally owned renewable energy operational in Scotland, and we are committed to growing this sector even further and have recently announced £3.5 million in community and renewable energy Scotland funding for projects in 2025-26, building on the success of last year's £1.5 million pilot fund, which supported 23 projects. We've also announced £1 million for community capacity building and secured £4.85 million through the local power plan, which will primarily support community energy projects in Scotland, and further details on this funding will be announced shortly.
Faisal Chowdhury.
Thank you. Thank the Cabinet Secretary for the answer. Community energy projects are key for our journey to net zero and putting money back in local economies. Last year, Edinburgh Community Solar Cooperative saved the Council £1 million in energy costs and its members money on their bills. In light of this, will the Cabinet Secretary join me in welcoming the £5 million investment from GB Energy into community energy in Scotland? Will she provide further details on how this investment will be delivered to projects like Edinburgh Community Solar Cooperative?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I think Mr Chowdhury has just exemplified how important it is to have projects like this, because they're actually having meaningful differences in communities, and there's an awful lot more work that can be done. One of my first meetings that I had with the incoming UK government was in the early days of setting up GB Energy. I don't even think they had the CEO in place at that point, but I made the point to Minister Shanks that when it came to any money for community energy, it was best not to reinvent the wheel or clutter the landscape when we've already got a very well respected and known vehicle for delivering funding in the CARES, Community and Renewable Energy Scotland. I urged him to look at that and to actually give money from GB Energy straight into that rather than setting up anything up new. I'm very pleased to say that he did look at it. He realised how well respected they were, and we were able to secure that money. So we'll work together to increase the capacity of CARES, but also to deliver more projects of the sort that Mr Chowdhury has just mentioned.
Thank you. Question number 7, Douglas Lumsden.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on when it will publish the outcome of the latest A96 corridor review.
Cabinet Secretary Fiona Hislop.
During the roundtable meeting for MSPs I held in Parliament on the 4th of February, which the member attended, I said that it is my intention to provide an update on the public's response to the consultation as soon as possible. I also said it will depend on the time required to review the considerable number of responses received, and I will also need to appraise Cabinet colleagues of it. The 12-week consultation period ended on the 21st of February. It received over 1,400 responses, which are currently being collated and analysed before publishing as soon as possible.
Douglas Lumsden.
Well, that's a disappointing answer, because the latest consultation on dualling of the A96 closed over 2 months ago. And in that time, we have witnessed around a dozen separate collisions on the A96, 3 of which were fatal and 1 involved an ambulance. Presiding Officer, we need urgent action. And appallingly, almost £6.5 million of taxpayers' money has been spent on both of the Scottish Government's reviews since 2022. Failure to fully dual the A96 will be Fiona Hislop's lasting legacy to the people of the North East. So can the Cabinet Secretary set out a timetable of when the results of the consultation will be published, and when this SNP government will finally dual the A96 in full, which was promised more than a decade ago?
Cabinet Secretary.
The public response is important. That will be published as soon as possible. And I can inform the Chamber that the Scottish Government took title to the land for the Inverness to Nairn, including Nairn bypass land, for the purpose of starting the dualling of the A96.
Thank you. That concludes general questions. And before we move to First Minister's question time, I invite members to join me in welcoming to the gallery the Honourable Marie Edwards, Speaker of the Legislative Assembly, Parliament of Victoria.